Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because when we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you. As Dr. Julian Hayes navigated through the endless stretch of space, a sudden array of alarms blared within the cramped cockpit of his medical supply spacecraft. His hands flew over the control panel, attempting to stabilize the ship as it shuddered violently, hurtling toward the unknown planet below. The last thing Julian saw before impact was the lush green expanse rushing to meet him. Julian awoke to the hiss of the emergency airlock engaging. With a groan, he unbuckled himself and staggered out of the wreckage, thankful to be alive but disoriented by his surroundings. The air was thick with a sweet, floral scent, and the landscape was a vivid tapestry of colors he had never seen on Earth. Towering trees with iridescent leaves swayed gently, and strange melodious sounds echoed in the distance. As he scanned the area for any signs of civilization or danger, a movement caught his eye. A figure approached him cautiously, her steps almost soundless on the soft ground. She was clearly not human, with her tall, slender frame and skin that shimmered like the surface of a pearl. Her eyes, large and expressive, watched him curiously. "Who are you?" Julian called out, clutching a piece of the ship's metal for defense. The figure stopped, tilting her head. "I am Lyra," she replied, her voice musical, yet marked with a hint of caution. "You are not from here. Your vessel, it fell from the sky?" Julian lowered his makeshift weapon, sensing no immediate threat from her. "Yes, I was transporting medical supplies across the galaxy when my navigation failed." "And you? How do you speak my language?" Lyra smiled slightly. "We are telepaths. We feel and sometimes can communicate through basic universal thoughts. It's primitive but effective." "Are you hurt?" Assessing his own condition, Julian felt a throbbing pain in his side, but nothing seemed broken. "I think I'm okay, just bruised. Can you tell me more about where we are? Is there a settlement nearby? Any form of communication with the outside world?" "This is Toralise. There is no settlement for miles around, and our communication beacon was lost in a storm months ago. My own ship was damaged, and I've been surviving here since. It seems we are in similar predicaments." Julian processed her words, the gravity of their situation settling in. "Looks like we'll need to work together to get out of this." "I'm Julian, by the way, Julian Hayes." Lyra extended a hand, which Julian shook, surprised by the warmth of her touch. "Very well, Julian Hayes. There is much to do if we are to survive here. First, we should seek shelter and find food. I can show you the edible plants and how to avoid the predators. It's fortunate for me that you have medical knowledge. We can exchange our skills." Together, they started walking, with Lyra leading the way. Julian listened intently as she explained the peculiarities of the planet, the bioluminescent flora that lit up the night, the creatures that were docile by day and predatory by night, and the fruit that was delicious but had to be peeled carefully to avoid the hallucinogenic layer beneath the skin. As they walked, Julian marveled at the strange beauty of Toralise. Despite the dire circumstances, there was a part of him that felt a thrill at the adventure that lay ahead. With each step, he became more aware of the incredible story he would have to tell if he ever made it home. As they ventured deeper into the alien landscape, Julian tried to take in everything Lyra was teaching him. The peculiar zigzag plants could clean water, the vibrant blue moss could treat minor cuts, and certain tree barks could be boiled into a nourishing broth. "Here," Lyra said, plucking a small, radiant fruit from a bush. "Try this. It's sweet, with a hint of spice." Julian hesitated, but trusted her judgment. The fruit exploded with flavor, and he couldn't help but smile. "That's incredible. Nothing like anything I've ever tasted." Lyra's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Toralise has its gifts. Now let's find a suitable place for shelter. The nights here can be dangerously cold." They selected a spot near a cliff face, where the rock could reflect heat back during the night. As they gathered materials, Julian found himself impressed not only by Lyra's knowledge, but also by her resourcefulness. "Back on Earth, I'm just a doctor, not much of a survivalist," Julian confessed as they worked on constructing a lean-to. "Yet, here you are adapting." "That's commendable," Lyra replied, handing him a sturdy branch for the frame. As they built, Julian asked, "What brought you to Toralise? You mentioned your ship was damaged." Lyra paused, a shadow crossing her face. "I was exploring new trade routes for my people. We are traders, roamers of the galaxy. But a meteor shower caught us off guard, and only I survived the crash. I'm sorry, Julian said, feeling a pang of empathy. Losing your crew like that, it must be tough. It is. But survival is a daily challenge here. One learns to look forward, not back. Lyra's tone was matter-of-fact, her resilience clear in her focus on the present tasks. By the time the shelter stood somewhat sturdily, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the land. Lyra suggested they gather food for dinner, leading Julian to a patch of bioluminescent mushrooms under a grove of tall, thin trees. As night falls, the predators come out. We should stay close and return to the shelter soon, Lyra instructed as she carefully cut mushrooms with a sharp stone. Julian nodded, staying vigilant. As they walked back, he asked, "These predators, what are they like?" "Most are nocturnal, attracted to movement and warmth. We will be safe if we stay in our shelter during the night and keep our thermal blanket secured," Lyra explained, her voice calm but serious. That night, after they ate, they sat by the entrance of their shelter, watching the stars. The sky was unfamiliar to Julian, none of the constellations recognizable. "It's strange," Julian mused aloud, "how different yet similar things are here. Back home, I'd probably be in a hospital right now, finishing a shift. And here I am on an alien planet talking about stars and survival." Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Home is a concept, not just a place. Perhaps, in time, this can feel a bit like home too." Julian smiled, touched by her perspective. "Perhaps it can, Lyra. And perhaps I'm not just surviving here, but learning things I never would have if I hadn't crashed." As they settled down for the night, wrapped in the warmth of their makeshift shelter and the thermal blanket, Julian felt an unexpected sense of security. Beside him, Lyra seemed more at peace than he had seen her since their first encounter. Together, they had built more than just a shelter. They had begun to build a partnership. The early rays of the alien sun crept over the horizon as Julian awoke to the sound of Lyra moving about outside their makeshift shelter. He stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from yesterday's labor, and joined her outside. "Good morning," he greeted, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Lyra looked up from where she was inspecting a strange, coiled plant. "Morning, Julian. I was thinking about improving our shelter today. We could use more insulation and maybe expand it a bit." Julian nodded, recalling the chill of the previous night despite their thermal blanket. "Sounds like a plan. What you need me to do?" "We need more branches for the frame and lots of those thick leaves to layer the outside," Lyra instructed, pointing to a cluster of bushy trees nearby. "They should help keep us warmer." The two set off to gather the necessary materials. As they worked, Julian found himself enjoying the physical labor, a stark contrast to the sterility of his previous medical environment. Each branch and leaf they added to their shelter brought a sense of achievement and comfort. "So, Lyra," Julian started as they took a brief break, sitting back to admire their progress. "You've been here a while before I crashed. What's been the hardest part for you?" Lyra tossed a small stone back and forth between her hands, contemplating. "Loneliness, I suppose," she admitted. "And constantly being on guard. It's tiring, Julian. But having you here, it's made a difference." Julian smiled, touched by her honesty. "I can't imagine what it was like for you alone here. But I'm here now, and we'll figure this out together." Encouraged, they returned to their task with renewed vigor. As they worked, they chatted about trivial things, Julian's favorite foods back on Earth, Lyra's fascination with the various planets she'd visited, and funny anecdotes from their travels. After hours of hard work, the shelter was significantly reinforced. Julian stood back, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Looks like it might actually hold up against one of those storms you mentioned now." Lyra laughed, a sound Julian was growing fond of. "Let's hope we don't have to test that theory too soon." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the land, Lyra showed Julian how to extract juice from a type of root that grew abundantly nearby. "It's nutritious and will help keep us hydrated," she explained as they squeezed the pulpy roots. Julian took a tentative sip of the juice. It was sweet and refreshing, unlike anything he had ever tasted. "You know, you could start your own alien survival show with all this knowledge," he joked. Lyra chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "And you would be my trusty sidekick, the doctor who heals with space-age technology and wild roots." "That's a show I'd watch," Julian laughed, feeling a deep sense of camaraderie building between them. As darkness enveloped their world, they sat outside their improved shelter, sharing stories and the juice from the roots. The stars above twinkled in unfamiliar patterns, but down here on Toralise, with Lyra by his side, Julian felt a surprising sense of belonging. The vast universe seemed a little smaller somehow, and the challenges ahead a little less daunting. The tranquility of their routine was disrupted when Lyra suddenly fell ill. One evening, after a meal of local fruits and roots, she began shivering uncontrollably, her skin taking on a pallid hue that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of their shelter. "Lyra, are you okay?" Julian asked, noticing her discomfort. "I don't feel well," she admitted, clutching her stomach. "I must have eaten something that wasn't right." Julian helped her to lie down, his medical instincts kicking in. "Tell me all your symptoms," he said, his voice calm but filled with concern. Lyra described her feelings: nausea, a sharp pain in her abdomen, and a dizziness that made the room spin. Julian listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I think you might have ingested a toxin from one of the plants. We need to treat this quickly," Julian decided. He rummaged through his medical kit, grateful for the foresight to pack broad-spectrum detox pills among his supplies. Administering the medication, Julian watched over Lyra, his concern growing as her condition seemed to worsen. Knowing more needed to be done, he recalled a conversation they had about local remedies. "Lyra, you mentioned a plant that could treat poisoning. Can you tell me which one?" Julian asked, trying to keep his voice steady. With effort, Lyra opened her eyes and pointed weakly outside. "Blue leaves, silver veins, by the stream. It's an antidote." Without hesitation, Julian grabbed a torch and headed out into the night. He found a plant by the stream, its blue leaves shining under the beam of his flashlight, silver veins glistening like threads of moonlight. Back at the shelter, Julian prepared a decoction from the leaves, following Lyra's instructions as best he could remember. He helped her sip the lukewarm liquid slowly, watching anxiously for any sign of improvement. As minutes turned into hours, Lyra's breathing eased, and the color returned to her cheeks. By morning, she was much better, though still weak. "Thank you, Julian," she murmured, her voice soft but clear. "You saved my life." Julian sighed in relief, sitting back on his heels. "We're a team, remember? We look out for each other." Over the next few days, Julian took over the daily tasks, allowing Lyra to rest. He collected food, maintained the shelter, and kept a vigilant watch over Lyra's health. Each day, she grew stronger, and Julian's relief deepened. During her recovery, they talked more about their homes and dreams, the conversation often drifting to what they might do once they left Toralise. Lyra expressed a desire to see Earth, intrigued by Julian's descriptions of its vast oceans and bustling cities. "You would like it, I think," Julian said one afternoon as they sat enjoying the gentle warmth of the sun. "It's different, but it's beautiful." "I would like that." Lyra smiled, her strength returning. "And you should visit my home, too. It's nothing like here or Earth, but it's special in its own way." Their shared experiences on Toralise had forged a bond stronger than either had anticipated, a connection born of necessity, but deepened through genuine affection and understanding. As Lyra regained her health, they resumed their explorations and plans, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they could rely on each other, no matter what challenges lay ahead. With Lyra fully recovered, they resumed their explorations of Toralise, eager to uncover more of its secrets. One morning, as the alien sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, Lyra led Julian to a part of the forest they hadn't yet explored. "Today, I want to show you the crystal caverns," Lyra said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "They're not far from here." As they walked through the dense forest, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the calls of unseen creatures, Julian felt a surge of curiosity. "Crystal caverns? That sounds intriguing. What are they like?" "They're one of the natural wonders of Toralise," Lyra explained. "The caverns are filled with natural crystals that glow with their own light. It's quite a sight." Their path took them down a narrow trail that twisted through towering trees and thick underbrush. Eventually, the forest opened up to reveal a large hill with an entrance to a cave. As they entered, Julian was immediately struck by the cool air and the shimmering light that seemed to dance on the walls. The cave was vast, and the walls were embedded with countless crystals that radiated a soft, multicolored light. "It's beautiful," Julian whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Lyra smiled, watching his reaction. "It gets even better. Follow me." They delved deeper into the caverns, the light from the crystals growing brighter with every step. Finally, they reached a large chamber where the crystals were so dense that the light was almost blinding. Lyra picked up a small crystal from the ground and handed it to Julian. These crystals are not only beautiful, they're also useful. They can store energy, much like batteries. Julian turned the crystal in his hand, watching it sparkle. That's incredible. We could use these to power any equipment we have, or even to signal for help. Yes, exactly, Lyra agreed. I've been collecting them since I arrived. But I wanted to share this place with you first before we use it for our needs. They spent the day in the caverns, collecting crystals and discussing potential uses for them. As they worked, Julian learned more about Lyra's scientific knowledge, her deep understanding of geology and chemistry, enhancing his medical expertise. When they had gathered enough crystals, they made their way back to their shelter. The return trip was filled with plans for the future, how they could utilize the crystals to improve their living conditions and possibly send a distress signal to passers-by in space. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the forest, Julian felt a deep sense of partnership with Lyra. They had started as strangers from different worlds, but now they were collaborators, each bringing their own strengths to ensure their survival and eventual rescue. Back at their shelter, they tested the crystals with some of the equipment Julian had salvaged from his ship. To their delight, the crystals powered a small transmitter, albeit weakly. We might need more crystals, or maybe I can boost the transmitter's range with some modifications, Julian mused, his mind racing with possibilities. Lyra nodded, her face alight with determination. We'll make it work. Together, that night, as they sat by the fire, eating a meal of roasted roots and discussing their next steps, Julian realized how much his life had changed since crashing on Toralise. What had started as a fight for survival had turned into an extraordinary journey of discovery, not just of the planet but of himself and his capacity to connect with someone so different yet so similar. As the fire crackled and the stars began to peek through the night sky, Julian felt a profound gratitude for his unexpected companion. Toralise might be alien, but with Lyra by his side, it felt like home. After a day spent gathering additional crystals from the caverns, Julian and Lyra returned to their shelter as the Toralise sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of deep purple and fiery orange. As they approached their camp, Julian suggested they try cooking a new dish using some of the alien tubers they discovered near the stream. Let's make it a bit of a celebration, Julian proposed, setting down the bags filled with crystals. We've made some real progress today. Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the last light of the day. That sounds wonderful. I know just the thing we can try. Together, they prepare the meal, Lyra instructing Julian on how to mix the tubers with some edible leaves and a tangy sauce made from crushed berries. As they worked side by side, the ease between them felt like the comfort of old friends. While the food cooked over the fire, Julian set up a small device he had been tinkering with, a makeshift speaker that could play music files from his datapad. The soft strains of a classical earth melody filled the air, blending with the alien night sounds of Toralise. This is nice, Lyra said, taking a seat on a smooth rock near the fire. Music is universal, isn't it? It seems so, Julian agreed, joining her. He handed her a plate of their cooked meal. Let's see if our culinary skills are as universal. They ate, and to their delight, the dish was delicious. Encouraged by their success, they relaxed into the evening, their conversation drifting from light-hearted banter to more personal stories. Julian found himself sharing more about his life on Earth, his family, his reasons for becoming a doctor, and his dreams of helping people not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. Lyra listened intently, her gaze thoughtful. And what about you? Julian asked after a pause. You've seen so much of the galaxy. What drives you? Lyra took a moment before answering. Curiosity, I suppose, and a desire to connect, whether it's trading goods or sharing knowledge. There's something beautiful about discovering the common threads that bind us all, no matter how different we might seem. Their conversation deepened as the fire crackled before them, the stars overhead twinkling in a sky unmarred by the light pollution of more populated worlds. Feeling the moment was right, Julian reached out his hand, palm up, towards Lyra. She looked at it, then at him, and placed her hand in his, her skin cool and smooth against his. Their eyes met, and something shifted, the air between them charged with an unspoken understanding. Julian leaned in, and Lyra met him halfway, their lips touching softly in a kiss that was tentative at first but grew more confident as they each responded to the other's movements. The kiss deepened, and Julian felt a surge of warmth through his body, an emotion so intense and yet so natural. They broke apart after a moment, breathless. That was unexpected, Lyra whispered, her cheeks flushed with a light color. Good unexpected, I hope? Julian asked, his voice low. Very good, Lyra assured him, her smile genuine. They leaned back against a log, still holding hands, watching the fire dance. As the night grew cooler, they moved closer, sharing warmth and newfound intimacy. The connection they had built over the past weeks had blossomed into something neither had anticipated but both now cherished. Lyra rested her head on Julian's shoulder, and he kissed her forehead. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm glad this happened. With you, Julian murmured. So am I, Lyra responded, her voice soft but sure. Surrounded by the sounds of the alien world and the gentle music still playing, Julian and Lyra found a new comfort in each other's presence. Their bond strengthened not just by survival, but by a genuine affection and understanding that transcended the stars above. The morning after their intimate evening, Julian awoke to the sound of Lyra tinkering with the crystal-powered transmitter they had been improving. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on her focused face. Julian watched her for a moment, admiring her concentration and the way her hair fell across her eyes. Morning, he said, sitting up and stretching. Anything new with the transmitter? Lyra looked up, her smile brightening the space. Good morning. Yes, actually. I think I've managed to boost the signal. We might be able to reach a passing ship if we're lucky. Julian's heart leaped at the prospect. Really? That's great news. What you need me to do? Help me set it up on that hill over there. Lyra pointed to a nearby rise that offered a clear view of the sky. The higher, the better for the signal. Together, they carried the device and a makeshift antenna made from various ship parts to the hilltop. Julian held the antenna steady as Lyra connected the last of the wiring. Okay, she announced, flipping a switch. It's on. Now we wait and hope someone is listening. They sat beside the device, watching the sky. Julian took Lyra's hand, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. What if we really get rescued? What will you do? Will you come back to Earth with me? Lyra squeezed his hand, her expression thoughtful. I would like that. I want to see your world, meet the people you care for, and maybe show you my home someday. The conversation drifted to dreams of future adventures together, visiting distant worlds and perhaps even making a difference in the galaxy. The warmth of the morning sun and the gentle breeze made the moment feel almost perfect, despite the uncertainty of their situation. As the hours passed, Julian's thoughts turned to the practicalities of their rescue. We should prepare a list of essentials to take back, just in case. Food, water, some of these crystals for sure. Lyra nodded. And the data pads with our notes. They could be valuable for anyone studying Toralise in the future. Just as they began to outline a plan, the transmitter crackled to life, startling them both. A voice, distorted by static, called out in the common trade language of the galaxy. Unidentified signal source. This is the cargo vessel Stratorunner. We received your distress signal. Please respond with coordinates and status. Lyra and Julian exchanged a look of disbelief and elation. Then Lyra responded, her voice steady. This is Lyra and Julian, stranded on Toralise. We are healthy and ready for rescue. Sending coordinates now. The voice replied, confirming the receipt of their coordinates. Stand by for rescue operations. We are altering our course to your location. Estimated time of arrival is 3 hours. Overwhelmed with relief and joy, Julian hugged Lyra tightly. We're going home, he whispered. Lyra hugged him back, her eyes bright with tears. Together, she affirmed. They spent the next few hours gathering their belongings and the valuable items they intended to take with them. As they worked, they discussed the immediate future, the rescue, and their excitement about introducing Lyra to Earth. Sitting atop the hill, waiting for the Stratorunner, Julian felt a profound gratitude for his journey on Toralise, not just for the survival and discovery, but for bringing Lyra into his life. Whatever awaited them in the stars, they would face it together, their bond forged in the wilds of an alien world but destined for the vast expanse of the galaxy. As the Stratorunner's sleek silhouette appeared in the sky, Julian and Lyra stood side by side, watching it descend with a mixture of excitement and a tinge of sadness. The spacecraft landed softly on the grassy plains of Toralise, stirring clouds of alien pollen. The hatch opened, and a small crew of 3 emerged, clad in the universal flight suits of space travelers. They approached Julian and Lyra, smiles breaking across their faces. Dr. Julian Hayes and Miss Lyra, I presume. The captain, a robust man with a commanding presence, extended his hand. I'm Captain Lure, and we're here to take you back to civilization. Julian shook his hand warmly. Thank you, Captain Lure. We're grateful to you and your crew for changing course to pick us up. Lyra, more reserved but equally thankful, nodded her agreement. Yes, thank you. We are ready to leave Toralise. The crew helped them load their belongings and the collected samples onto the ship. As Julian walked up the ramp, he turned for one last look at the planet that had been their home for the past several months. The lush landscapes, the crystal caverns, and the quiet nights under starlit skies flashed through his mind. Once aboard, Julian and Lyra were shown to a small cabin where they could rest during the journey. As the ship began its ascent, leaving the atmosphere of Toralise behind, Lyra leaned against the viewport, watching the planet shrink away. Do you think we'll ever come back here? She asked, her voice soft. Julian wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Maybe one day, as tourists rather than castaways. Toralise will always be a special place for us. Lyra smiled, leaning into him. It will be. And I'm looking forward to seeing Earth with you. It sounds like a wonderful place. As the Stratorunner made its way through the cosmos, Captain Lure invited them to the ship's common area to celebrate their successful rescue. Over a meal of standard space rations, far less appetizing than their experiments with Toralise cuisine, Lure shared tales of his travels, while his crew listened eagerly to Julian and Lyra's stories of survival and discovery. The conversation turned to the future, to possibilities and plans. Julian spoke about his desire to continue his medical practice, perhaps incorporating some of the natural remedies they'd learned on Toralise. And what about you, Lyra? One of the crew asked. What's next for you? Lyra's eyes sparkled with ambition. I want to learn more about Earth and its cultures, but I also plan to help Julian document our findings from Toralise. Who knows? Maybe there's a book in our future. The crew laughed, and the rest of the journey passed in a blur of shared stories and burgeoning friendships. When Earth finally came into view, its blue oceans and green lands a stark contrast to the reds and purples of Toralise, Julian felt a surge of homecoming joy. As they prepared to disembark, Captain Lure shook their hands. It was an honor to bring you home. If you ever decide to write that book, make sure to send me a copy. We will, Julian promised. Stepping off the Stratorunner, Julian and Lyra faced a crowd of media, curious about the survivors from Toralise. Amidst the flashing cameras and shouted questions, Julian squeezed Lyra's hand, grounding her. Later, away from the chaos, they shared a quiet moment together, looking out over a peaceful Earth sunset. We made it, Julian murmured, his heart full. Not just through survival, but to a new beginning. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. Together, she affirmed, her voice resolute. As they stood together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, they knew that while their adventure on Toralise had ended, their journey together was just beginning. And whatever the future held, they would face it as they had everything on Toralise, with courage, unity, and unwavering support for each other.